The Anderson family Christmas dinner was going exactly as I'd expected. Same judgmental stares, same backhanded compliments, same hierarchy of success measured purely by corporate titles and corner office dimensions. I pushed my mother's famous roast beef around my plate, trying to become invisible as my sister Catherine held court at the other end of the table. So then the CEO himself said my presentation was revolutionary, Catherine announced, her voice carrying that familiar note of superiority. That's why they fast-tracked my promotion to senior vice president at Morgan & Pierce. That's wonderful, darling. Mom beamed, topping off Catherine's wine glass. Isn't that wonderful, Daniel? Dad nodded proudly. Always knew you'd make it big, Katie. Following in your old man's footsteps. I took another sip of wine, remembering when Dad had said the same about me. Before I'd quit my prestigious position at Goldman Sachs to start my own consulting firm. Before I'd become the family disappointment. What about you, Olivia? Aunt Susan turned to me with fake concern. Still doing that, what do you call it? Independent strategic consulting, I supplied, straightening in my chair. Actually, my firm just landed a major dash. Oh, honey, Catherine interrupted, laughing that perfect corporate laugh she'd perfected. Still doing that silly consulting? Working from your apartment with your little laptop? The table rippled with polite chuckles. Even Mom tried to hide her smile behind her napkin. My work is actually quite dash, I tried again. Real successful people work for big companies, Liv, Catherine cut in again. Like Morgan & Pierce. We're about to close the biggest deal in company history. $15 billion merger. That's what real business looks like. I felt my cheeks burn but kept my voice steady. Consulting can be very impactful. In fact, I'm currently working on dash. Remember when we were kids? Catherine turned to the table at large. Olivia always had to do everything her own way. Remember her special lemonade stand? She insisted on using real lemons while I was smart enough to use powder mix. I made $20, she made $5. More laughter. More pitying looks. At least she's independent, Mom offered weakly. That's something, right? Dad cleared his throat. You know, Liv, I could make a call. Get you an interview at Pierce. Entry level, of course, but dash. I'm doing fine, Dad, I said quietly, gripping my fork tighter. If they only knew what was sitting in my inbox right now. Fine isn't the same as successful, Catherine smirked. But hey, not everyone can handle the pressure of real corporate success. Some people are just meant for smaller things. I thought about the confidential documents on my laptop upstairs. About the emails marked urgent from certain very important people at Morgan & Pierce. About what tomorrow morning would bring. More wine, anyone? Mom chirped, trying to break the tension. Actually, I stood up, folding my napkin carefully. I should head up. Early meeting tomorrow. Catherine's laugh followed me to the stairs. Oh right, your meetings. In your pajamas on Zoom. I didn't respond. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Tomorrow would change everything. In my old bedroom, now Mom's occasional guest room, she'd redecorated it the week after I moved out. I opened my laptop. 3 new urgent emails from Morgan & Pierce's legal team. 2 missed calls from their CEO. I smiled, opening the merger documents they'd sent over. Catherine was right about one thing: Morgan & Pierce was about to close the biggest deal in their history. A $15 billion merger that would make headlines. What she didn't know was that her perfect company had overlooked one tiny detail in their rush to close the deal. One small but crucial signature they needed. I took another sip of wine, scanning through the urgent emails. The language grew increasingly desperate with each message. Ms. Anderson, your immediate attention is required. This matter is of utmost urgency. Please contact us as soon as possible regarding the Clayton merger. 3 months ago, I discovered a critical flaw in Morgan & Pierce's merger strategy. Their entire $15 billion deal hinged on intellectual property rights that, through a series of complex acquisitions, actually belonged to one of my clients. A fact their expensive corporate lawyers had somehow missed. My phone buzzed, Catherine's voice carried up the stairs, still holding court at dinner. Of course, being SVP means I'm integral to all major decisions. I opened my laptop's hidden folder labeled Project Phoenix, named after the mythical bird, not the city. Inside were months of research, documentation, and correspondence that proved exactly how integral Catherine really was to this deal. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Dad entered carrying a slice of Mom's apple pie. "Thought you might want dessert," he said, setting it on my desk. He lingered, looking around the room that no longer held any trace of my childhood. "Listen, Liv, about that position at Pierce." "Dad," I started, but he held up his hand. "Just hear me out. Catherine could put in a good word. You could work your way up, have real security, real success dash. Like you did." I asked quietly. He flinched. We both knew the story, how he'd given 30 years to Morgan and Pierce, only to be politely retired the moment they could replace him with someone younger and cheaper. Catherine had conveniently forgotten that part when she'd taken her job there. "I just want what's best for you," he sighed. I glanced at my screen, at the emails marked urgent, at the documents that would determine the fate of the company that had discarded my father. "I know, Dad. And tomorrow you'll see exactly what that is." He left looking worried. Downstairs, I could hear Catherine regaling the family with another tale of corporate triumph. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from my business partner and best friend Maya. "They're panicking. P.O. called me directly trying to get your number. Should we tell them?" "Not yet," I replied. "Let them sweat a little longer." I opened the merger documents again, focusing on Section 7.3 intellectual property rights. The entire deal depended on patents that technically belonged to my client Old Grove Technologies, a small but brilliant tech firm that Morgan and Pierce had dismissed as irrelevant. Just like they'd dismissed me. Another email popped up, this one from Catherine herself. "Hey sis, weird question, but do you know anything about Old Grove Technologies? Need to verify something for tomorrow's meeting. Call me." I left it unanswered, just like her 3 previous emails this week. Let her figure it out herself. After all, real successful people work for big companies, right? My phone rang. Morgan and Pierce's CEO himself. Bold move, calling at 11 p.m. on Christmas. "Ms. Anderson," his voice was strained, professional veneer cracking. "I understand you represent Old Grove Technologies?" "I do," I replied calmly, hearing Catherine's laughter float up from downstairs. "We need to discuss the Clayton merger. Urgently." I smiled, thinking of all the times Morgan and Pierce had ignored my calls when I tried to raise this issue months ago. "Of course," I said. "My office 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring your legal team. And Mr. Roberts? Tell Catherine to be there too. After all, she's integral to all major decisions, isn't she?" The silence on the other end was deafening. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. My office wasn't in my apartment, despite Catherine's assumptions. Anderson Consulting occupied the entire top floor of a downtown high-rise floor-to-ceiling windows, modern decor, and a view that made Morgan and Pierce's buildings look small. At 8:55 a.m. my receptionist buzzed. "Ms. Anderson? Morgan and Pierce's team is here." I straightened my Armani suit, not that different from Catherine's, except mine was paid for by my own company's success, not corporate credit. "Send them in." They filed in like a corporate funeral procession. CEO Roberts, their legal team, 2 board members, and finally Catherine. Her face went from confused to shocked as she took in my office. "Please sit," I gestured to the conference table. "Olivia," Catherine started, "what is this dash?" "Ms. Anderson," CEO Roberts interrupted, shooting Catherine a silencing look. "About the Clayton merger." I opened my laptop, projecting documents onto the wall screen. "You mean the merger that depends entirely on patent rights you don't actually own?" The room went silent. Catherine's face paled as she recognized the documents, the same ones she'd dismissed when they'd crossed her desk months ago. "Old Grove Technologies," I continued, "holds exclusive rights to the core technology your merger is based on. Rights that my firm helped them secure." "That's impossible," Catherine blurted. "I personally reviewed dash." "No," I cut in, pulling up her email trail. "You delegated the review to a junior associate who missed it, just like you've missed every warning we've sent over the past 3 months." The CEO's knuckles whitened around his pen. "What do you want?" I smiled, thinking of all those family dinners, all those dismissive comments about my silly consulting work. "Old Grove is willing to negotiate," I said. "But they have conditions. Starting with a complete restructuring of the merger terms." For the next hour I outlined the new terms. With each point, Catherine sank lower in her chair, watching her revolutionary, deal transform into something very different. And finally, I concluded, Old Grove wants a seat on the board. Which I'll be taking. You. Catherine's voice cracked. But you're just a dash. Just what, Katie? A consultant? Working from my laptop. I gestured around my office. Look around. While you were bragging about corporate success, I was building something real. The CEO cleared his throat. The terms are acceptable. We'll have the papers drawn up. Already done, I said, sliding folders across the table. Sign today or the Clayton deal dies. Your choice. They signed. End of part 3. Part 4. The next family dinner was considerably different. News of the Morgan and Pierce restructuring had made every business headline. Historic merger saved by Anderson Consulting, read the Wall Street Journal. More potatoes, Olivia? Mom offered, her voice carrying a new note of respect. Catherine sat quietly, pushing food around her plate. Her perfect corporate world had shifted dramatically. The merger she'd bragged about was now known as the Anderson deal in industry circles. How's the new board position? Dad asked, pride evident in his voice. The same pride that used to be reserved for Catherine. Productive, I replied. We're implementing major changes at Morgan and Pierce. Starting with their retirement policies. Dad's eyes widened slightly. He knew what that meant. The policy that had forced him out was being rewritten. Actually, I continued, we're looking for experienced advisors for our new senior mentorship program. Interested, Dad? The look on his face was worth every moment of doubt I'd ever had about leaving corporate life. I heard they're restructuring departments, Aunt Susan ventured, glancing at Catherine. Yes, I confirmed. We're emphasizing thorough due diligence over quick deals. Some management changes were necessary. Catherine's demotion hadn't been my decision, technically. But her rushed handling of the Clayton merger had made it inevitable. Your sister's been quite helpful, I added, surprising everyone, including Catherine. Her insights into what not to do have been valuable. Later, as I was leaving, Catherine caught up to me in the driveway. Why didn't you tell me, she asked. About Old Grove, about your firm, any of it? I thought about all the time she'd interrupted me at these dinners, all the condescending comments about my career choice. You never asked, Katie. You were too busy talking about your own success to notice anyone else's. She nodded slowly. I deserved that. And probably the demotion too. You did, I agreed. But you're smart, Catherine. Maybe now you'll actually do the work instead of just taking the credit. Like you did. Exactly. Driving home to my penthouse apartment, definitely not working from my pajamas, I thought about success, real success, not the kind measured in corner offices and corporate titles. My phone buzzed, another acquisition opportunity. Old Grove had identified other overlooked patents. More companies like Morgan and Pierce, too busy being big to see the small but crucial details. I smiled, thinking of Catherine's words from Christmas. Real successful people work for big companies. No, I thought. Real successful people build their own empires, one signature at a time.